I'm in the Barossa Valley, one of the richest and most intriguing parts of Australia. Beautiful views, fantastic wine, great accommodation. You can even live in a tree if you want to. Really, I know it sounds like a nursery rhyme, but there was an old man who lived in a tree. This tree. Weird or what?
This week, I'm sniffing and sampling South Australia's Barossa Valley. From Springton to Angaston and down to Tanunda. I'll raise a glass to a shonky doctor.
This is Horace team. Can you trust this man?
Fill the streets with beautiful music.
I like it.
And try my hand at kegeling.
I think I put a bit of spin on that. This is why we do walks like this, isn't it? This is the fella who lived in the tree. His name was Johann Friedrich Herbig. He was a penniless immigrant from Prussia in Germany, and when he got here, he leased 80 acres of this land, but he was totally skint, so he couldn't afford a house, and did what a lot of the indigenous people did. He lived in this tree all by himself for 3 years. And then, excuse me, could I borrow you for a moment? Then he got married. I hope you don't mind this quick proposal. Here we are. So now the two of us are living in this tree, and we were here for about a year until... Can I borrow you now? What's your name?
Matilda.
Matilda. Matilda, you are now a little boy, and you're called August because you were born in August, OK? And the three of us actually lived in this tree together until 12 months later. Can I have you now? What's your name? Jesse, right, you're now Wilhelm, and the four of us all lived in the trees. So here's where we sleep, there's the kitchen, there's the bedroom, until eventually we decided we wanted to have another child, and we built ourselves a hut. I don't blame us, really, do you? Thanks a lot, bye.
And they didn't go far. Just a few hundred metres up the road, in fact.
And this is it. This is the actual hut where Johann Friedrich and his two sons and his wife Caroline lived. And although it sounds like a really charming story, it's actually a tale of enormous destitution and hardship.
Take Caroline, for instance. She was just 16 when she arrived in Australia. The next year, she was brutally attacked, ravaged, and left for dead. Back then, she could have become an outcast, but Johann gave her a home and a family.
Eventually, this place got too small for them, and they moved into this house. It's wonderful the way they stepped up and up. It's a bit better than a tree, this, isn't it? Eventually, they had 16 children, and Caroline adopted one of her sisters as well. So she was looking after 17 children. And to me, this is an archetypical story. This was a woman who never spoke any English, destitute when she came here, but by the time of her death, her children were doing fantastically well, and now, as you can see, it's virtually a little palace here, isn't it? Great story.
The Herbigs now have a big family tree of a different kind, with over 800 descendants.
The Barossa isn't a town like most of the places I walk through. It's a series of villages and wineries. And my next stop is about 30 kilometres away. But if you think I'm schlepping all the way there on foot, you're mistaken. This Pom has hired a car.
I'm heading north to one of the oldest towns in the district. As you can see, Angaston hasn't changed much since the 1850s. I imagine it's the sort of place where everyone knows everyone and their business. An old-fashioned town with old-fashioned values.
When you're doing a television programme like this, one of the best ways of researching is to get the local newspaper. And so I picked this up and I noticed this editorial which says, "Respect, it seems, is rapidly vanishing in all walks of life in almost every quarter of society today. This ranges from declining customer service standards to people refusing to provide the simple apology for getting things wrong." Quite right. But then I looked at the name of the editor, and it is Tony Robinson. Is it me? Is that what I do in my spare time? Who knows?
But there's no mystery about who put the Angus in Anguston. International capitalist George Fife Angus. It was his money that built the Barossa, paid for the first wave of settlers, and set up churches and charities. Sounds like naming the town after him was the least they could do. Mind you, one bloke here found out George wasn't someone you should cross.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you know which famous Barossa figure lived here in the 1850s?
Horace Dean.
Horace Dean, absolutely right. It was Horace Dean. Do you know what Horace Dean did?
He practiced as a doctor.
He practiced as a doctor, that's right. So what I want to know is, can you trust a man called Horace? And this is Horace Dean.
Wide-eyed Horace here was an American and, as it turned out, a bit of a rogue. In 1850, he put up his doctor's shingle here in Anguston. Horace and George Fife Angus got on well at first, but when the doc tried to challenge George's authority, things turned nasty.
Dean wanted to start a district authority here, and Angus was opposed to it. And eventually, Angus wrote to America and checked his medical qualifications, and the people wrote back and said, no, he wasn't a real doctor at all. He was a fake. And so Horace was exposed. Then he turns up again in New South Wales, and he stood as a local politician 3 times. The first 2 times he was disbarred. There's a theme running through his life, I feel. And the 3rd time he got in as a local politician, and he was kicked out after 6 months because he was so rubbish. So I just wondered whether or not you would be prepared to raise a toast to one of the great anti-heroes of the Barossa. Would you be Horace Dean for us?
Oh, I suppose I can do that, yes.
Thank you very much. If you just hold that in front of you, that's quite believable, isn't it? Beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, will you drink a toast to the great Horace Dean? You're his wife?
I am.
Oh, let me leave that for you to look at tonight.
Thank you.
I think you'll be in luck tonight.
I'd like to take some more time to, well, you know, but I must get on.
I was just on my way down to Tanunda and I saw a sign for a farmer's market. It doesn't look much from here, does it? But there's quite a lot of noise coming from inside there.
It's a red wine-based Balsamic,
Yeah.
aged in barrel for 8 years.
Fennel, sage and garlic.
Oh, thank you.
You will have filled up by the time you go around, that's for sure.
This is so good. Like it?
The Barossa region's now becoming as famous for its food as it is for its wine. And I'm not the only one who's noticed.
Look who I've seen. Tetsuya, you're a Sydney boy, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
So what are you doing here?
Well, here is we do an event on tomorrow, so just start prep today. So we just arrived, and then I'm just looking around the market to organize the produce for the dinner.
You've got one of the most famous, most successful restaurants in the whole of Australia. What do you think of this place?
I mean, shock surprise, a nice surprise.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, produce are so good. I mean, I go other market, it's other, nothing against anything, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, yeah.
But this is a more real people's market.
Absolutely.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, that's how I felt. Because like a farmer's market, you kind of go, another farmer's market, it'll be exactly the same as the last one.
Yes.
But here, the food is so good and the people are so committed, aren't they? Lots of small, ambitious businesses.
Real. I respect that. You know,
Yeah.
produce even just a little salad leaves has actual taste.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Very nice meeting you.
Nice to see you. Bye.
Today, my walk is a drive around South Australia's beautiful Barossa Valley. I've barked up an unusual family tree, made an appointment with a rogue doctor, and blown my diet at a country farmer's market.
Right, I'm off to Tanunda now. Come on, get your skates on.
All right, I know I should be walking off all that lovely local produce I was stuffing my face with before, but it's about 10 k's to Tanunda from here. Besides, it's the perfect opportunity to enjoy the scenery and remind yourself that fabulous Barossa wines come from fabulous Barossa vines.
I love these old vines. They look really great, don't they? Look at this gnarled old beast. That's pretty good, isn't it? Excuse me. Excuse me.
How you going?
Can you tell me anything about these vines?
Oh, these vines?
Yeah.
Well, to us, they're quite significant. These vines were planted back in 1843.
Really? Who by?
It was a German migrant called Christian Orecht. And him, as well as the fellow settlers, were all planting vines, you know, early in the 1800s.
And they were onto something. By the 1890s, the Barossa was filled with wineries making a killing, selling fortified wine to us Poms.
And because these are unique as far as they've never had phylloxera or disease, that it does make them some of the oldest surviving vines in the world.
Yeah, I suppose just the fact that they've survived means they must be making pretty good wine.
Exactly. If they weren't, they wouldn't be in the ground.
Sure.
Yeah.
Take a look at this, will you? Have a good look, because that is possibly the oldest vine, not only in the Barossa, not only in Australia, but possibly in the universe. I think you would agree.
I would agree with that.
It doesn't matter whether it's old or not. Damn good wine.
Now, usually, I'd be sampling some of what those vines could offer, but this is a walk. No, actually, it's a drive, so better not. Besides, things are starting to turn a bit nasty down in Tanunda.
I'm afraid I'm resorting to using this from now on. Hey, look at that bloke. Some people never stop working, do they? You get... Oh, very nice, oh yay. You get tap cryers all over the world, don't you? It is frankly a bit balmy. Yes, oh yay. Are you open?
Yeah.
Can I dump this down?
You can.
Thank you very much. Normally on a walk like this, I wouldn't dream of going into a museum or an art gallery because however good they are, there's one in every town and city, isn't there? But it's pouring with rain, so you've just got to make do. These are pretty nice, aren't they? Look at all this stuff. It says here that they're all being scrubbed off the wall tomorrow because they're only part of a festival, which seems a bit of a pity, doesn't it? Zach! Come in here. Look at this. Look. How about that then? Wow. When the pipe organ was installed in the Adelaide Town Hall in 1877, it was the largest organ in the colony. I'm not surprised, are you? Isn't that magnificent? Normally these things are so heavy and oppressive, aren't they? But this is why we do walks like this, isn't it? So that you just happen upon things like a musical instrument the size of a house. I think that is so great.
Still no change in the weather. I'll need a safe haven. I think I'll make like the Barossa's original 19th century Lutheran settlers and try a place of worship.
Oh, that's better. One thing that is really noticeable in the Barossa is the number of churches that there are. And when you come into a quiet, contemplative place like this, it's hard to imagine quite how angry those original German worshippers got with each other. Ian, they never stopped rowing, did they?
They did not. They started in Germany and kept it up when they came to South Australia.
What was it that they used to disagree with each other about?
Well, the big argument between the two synods was when the 1,000-year empire of God would come to earth. And some believed it would come tomorrow or the next day, depending, they put it off. And then some believed it was way down the track.
So if you thought the world was going to end tomorrow, then you might stay worshipping in this church. But if you thought it was going to be down the track, then you'd go off and start another church.
Oh, that's exactly right. And if they didn't like each other, they might, at choir practice, ring the bells to disturb their service and things like that. No, there was quite a bit of antagonism, and they disagreed very quickly. I think at one stage there were 38 branches of the Lutheran Church in Australia.
And the pastors used to preach in a really fiery, devil-rejecting way, didn't they?
Oh, yes, and in the older Lutheran churches, the altar was right up there in the centre. And the pastor used to light bits of paper and throw it down into the congregation as it happened and say, this is what will happen to you if you don't behave yourself. It is the real fire and brimstone as the fiery bits of paper descended on the congregation.
All of these stories sound quite funny, don't they? And also a long time ago. But in fact, this sort of practice was still going on in the 20th century.
Absolutely.
When did it end?
Well, 1966. But people still remember which church their parents went to. And it still lingers a bit today, but it will be gone in a generation.
But it's this that explains why there are so many churches in the Barossa.
Exactly. 4 in this tiny town.
Thank you very much.
Okay, pleasure.
That's really interesting. Bye.
It might have been fire and brimstone in church, but those turn-of-the-century Lutherans did have their lighter, dare I say, wacky side. If I can just find an unsuspecting crowd, I'll show you what I mean.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to disturb you. Now, this is about a thing called tin kettling. Have any of you ever heard of it? Yes? Have you ever done any tin kettling? Oh, well, look, would you three mind going to ask these ladies whether we could blag sufficient musical instruments in order to do the demonstration? Brilliant. OK. Tin kettling. This took place normally on the night before a wedding, and the bridesmaids and the bride would be at home demurely plucking the down off feathers in order to stuff the marital duvet, while the blokes would be outside and they'd tie down the horses and tie down the dogs. Oh, this is great, look, the stuff's coming. And then they would collect up tin cans and saucepans and kerosene cans, and they would start bashing them outside the bride's house until eventually the bride gave in and she would open the door and she would give them homemade wine and bits of cake. So that essentially is what we need to do now to recreate the tin kettling. Yes, we're warming up now. And 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is... That's good. I like it. Oh, come on. Yeah. That's good. Can we go out the door? You come out the door? Keep going.
In telly, this is known as a spontaneous crowd scene. In legal circles, it's known as creating a public nuisance, and we could probably be arrested. Mind you, it wouldn't be the first time.
In fact, right here in Tanunda, in 1903, a tin kettling took place. It got very rowdy. Some bloke knifed another one with a little penknife, and eventually a whole load of people were arrested and charged with noisy conduct or whatever it was in those days. 18 of them were found guilty and fined 5 shillings. So I think it's probably prudent if we... That's it. Keep going, but very softly.
I don't know if you've noticed, But I've spent most of the day in South Australia's Barossa Valley, which is, of course, one of the country's premier wine regions, and I've barely had a drop. I wonder if I can knock a few down in here.
This takes me back to my feckless youth, my days of 10-pin bowling, but I guess this isn't actually 10-pin bowling, is it?
No, that's right. It's 9-pin bowling, kegling. Originally it was from Germany.
Yeah.
And when the immigrants emigrated all over the world, they took the game with them, and he came here to Australia, and they established it here in 1858.
So they've been playing it here all that time?
Yes.
And are there many of these alleys left now?
No, this is the only traditional one in the Southern Hemisphere.
Can I have a go?
Oh, absolutely.
Come on, my son.
In the early days, the settlers would bring out their kegels after church. Every pin they knocked down absolved a sin. Me, I'll settle for points.
Very good. So we'll have a look at the scores over here.
Yeah. What's this, a poodle? -1 point.
A poodle goes off the alley and
Yeah.
goes into the gutter.
Right, here we go. I do not wish to get a poodle.
30 coming up. You can do it. That'll be a good one. Yes!
Well, thank you ever so much, guys. I really feel like a proper Kegel player now. I'm not one poodle.
Before you go, we'd like to make you an honorary member of our Kegel Club.
Hey, to measure.
How's this then?
Well, now that I'm a member, perhaps I should have one more bowl.
Very good.
Bye.
Bye, Tony.
Here's a funny thing. In 19th century New York, Kegel was actually banned by law.
Apparently, it used to get so rowdy that eventually the coppers stopped them from playing anything that involved the knocking down of 9 pins. So they stuck another pin in front, and that was the birth of 10-pin bowling.
Right, off with the Kegel shirt and on with my drinking pants. I've left one of South Australia's best, and I do mean the best, for last.
You may wonder, excuse me, why I'm walking through a bottle shop. Well, the answer is I have come to worship at the shrine of Grange Hermitage, Grange Hermitage, the most iconic, the most famous of all Australian wines, which was started in 1951 by a young winemaker called Max Schubert. His idea was that he wanted to make a full-blooded Australian wine that would be better if you left it for a while. So he made some, laid it down, following year made some more, laid it down, and the next year, and the next year, until it was time for him to give his bosses a taste. And he went into the office, he uncorked it, that's the sound effect, and he tipped it out, and he gave it to them, and they said... They hated it. They absolutely loathed it. And poor old Max was absolutely mortified.
But he was a determined fella. Even though his bosses wrote and told him to stop making the stuff, Max kept laying more down, in secret.
Until about 10 years after the first laying down of the Hermitage, word started to get through to his bosses that this wine was not only rather tasty and rather good, but very, very sellable. And they wrote him another letter saying, would you mind laying some more down? Could you start again? Of course, he'd never stopped, had he? And thank goodness he hadn't, because he had produced this most wonderful Australian wine, which you are no longer allowed to call Hermitage, although you probably never did, or Hermitage, which you might well have, because the French say that Australians aren't allowed to call an Australian wine by a French name, which I think is a bit babyish, don't you? Oh, and by the way, if you want a bottle, a very large bottle and a very good bottle, that's what it's going to set you back, all right?
So, have I enjoyed my day's drive come walk through the Barossa? Well, I think you know the answer to that question. Just don't go shouting about it, all right?
I'm really split down the middle because half of me wants to rave about it and the other half wants to keep quiet because I'm frightened that if too many people come here, they'll muck it all up. Nevertheless, if you do happen to drop by, you must try the cheese and the bread and the peppers and the olives and the meats and the wine. In the year 1855, the biggest earthquake in New Zealand's history hit town. It was so powerful that the coast around here rose by about 2 metres. So, bam! If you'd been standing here at the beginning of the earthquake, by the end of it, you'd have been standing up here somewhere. All of which should have been very good news for Baron von Alsdorf, who was a very rich and very prescient man who was terrified of earthquakes, so he'd built himself a solid brick earthquake-proof house. But unfortunately, it collapsed on him, squashed him and killed him, making him the only person around here to die during the earthquake. Welcome to Wellington.
This week I'm going international to New Zealand's capital, Wellington, starting at Lambton Quay and making my way to Miramar.
See what they built for him here.
It's the spiritual home of a dog after my own heart.
He's very sad. Very sad. Yes, that's enough, Eagle.
I'll relive the Battle of Buttle Street with bikers and builders.
We're not going to let them through, whatever we do.
And who will win one of the all-time great desert wars?
It is, of course, as they say round here, a pavlova.
It was actually built while we were doing The Lord of the Rings.
Oh, and keep your eyes peeled for a famous director.
Peter, this is absolutely splendid, isn't it?
Windy Wellington, perched at the bottom of the North Island, smack bang in the middle of the country. It's the home of New Zealand's government, and that's where I'm starting my walk.
In the 1850s, they put up a wooden Parliament building on this site, but by 50 years later, the Prime Minister had decided that it wasn't posh enough. So while the MPs were away over the Christmas recess, he knocked it down and built a brick one here, which burnt down 9 years later, leaving just that front bit there. But that was the opportunity to put up a Parliament House to die for. Look at that. You've got all these elegant classical columns, and then you've got the front entrance and the mighty steps leading up to the entrance. There should have been a great big dome on the top of it, but they never got round to finishing that. Indeed, they didn't get round to building the second wing over there at all. Instead, in the 1960s, they put up this incredible edifice, the Beehive, which isn't great, is it? Excuse me.
Oh.
What do you think of the Beehive?
Oh, it's a polarising question.
Yeah, which is why I asked it.
People love it or hate it.
Do you love it or hate it?
I love it.
You love it? They're mad. They're totally mad. Bye.
Well, it is pretty brutal architecture, isn't it? Anyway, moving on. So what do Wellington and Australia's Adelaide have in common? Answer: the Wakefields. Edward Wakefield was a felon and a visionary. After kidnapping a teenage heiress, he was sent to jail, which is where he came up with the idea of founding South Australia's capital.
Anyway, he had a brother called William who did pretty much the same thing. He was involved in the kidnap plot, went to jail. When he came out, came over to New Zealand and was one of the founding fathers of Wellington. He worked for the New Zealand Company, did a number of dodgy deals with the Maori, pegged out a lot of land, and eventually there was an expose of him in the local newspaper, whose editor was Dr. Isaac Featherstone. And Wakefield went mad. He challenged Featherstone to a duel, and Featherstone fired first and missed. So now it was up to William to deliver the killer blow. He pointed his gun, lifted it in the air, fired into the air, and said, "I would never shoot a man who has 7 daughters." So even for a scallywag, he had a bit of honour, didn't he?
I'm heading down to the Wellington waterfront.
Hiya. We're just doing a story for some dogs. I wondered if you'd like to join us.
Yeah, would love to.
I'm not usually the sort to hang out down by the docks.
Excuse me, ladies, just round the corner there, I'm going to be telling a story.
But I found the perfect yarn for a crowd of salty old sea dogs.
Come listen to the story. Come listen. Come on then. Come on, let's wait. OK, doggy dogs, are you sitting comfortably? Good. Then I'll begin. Once upon a time, way back in the 1930s, there was a dog called Paddy who lived where you're sitting now. What happened was he had a tiny little mistress, a little girl whose dad was a sailor. So she used to come down here with Paddy and wait for her dad to come back off the boats until a really tragic thing happened. The little girl, when she was just 3.5, died. And after she died, Paddy would never go home again. Paddy just stayed here all the time. Presumably, Paddy thought that maybe his mistress would come back home. But no, of course, she never did. And Paddy just waited and waited. And eventually, people started to grow interested in him. The taxi drivers started to drive him about, and the sailors began to give him lifts in their boats, and he became more and more famous. Eventually, he was made assistant night watchman of the docks, in charge of protecting the people from smugglers and sailors and rodents. And eventually, Paddy the Wanderer died. His funeral was led by taxi drivers. Igor, see what they built for him here? There was a fountain, this doggy fountain, and every July the 17th, which is the anniversary of the day he died. Igor, come and have a look over here. Can you see that Bond store? That's now owned by the Museum of Wellington City and Sea. And every July the 17th, they renew his dog licence. That's sad, isn't it? Can you give me a little lick? It's very, yes, it is. It's very sad. Very sad. Yes, that's enough, Igor. Thank you, darling. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope your masters and mistresses enjoyed it too. You've got a lovely mistress, haven't you? Does she have anything scratched behind the ears? Yes. Yes, she does. Lovely girl. Where am I again? Oh, yes, New Zealand. This is Cable Street here, and about 20 years ago, they decided to build a national museum called Te Papa on this site. Prior to that, there'd been a big hotel here, and of course, they were going to have to demolish it, except 2 local entrepreneurs were having a dinner of steak and chips one evening, and they had this brilliant idea, which was that instead of demolishing it, they would lift it up on hydraulic jacks, shove railway bogies, 96 of them, underneath it, and move it across the road. And that's what they did over the course of 2 weekends, between 5 and 10 metres an hour. And there was no serious damage. They even kept the bottles in it during the move, and they didn't break. And here it is now, 20 years later, with a golden hippopotamus on the front door. Very nice.
Of course, there's more to Wellington than white colonial history. I'm heading down Taranaki Street to a modern-day building with some not-so-modern Maori foundations.
Hello.
Kia ora, Tony.
Oh,
Welcome to Te Aropa.
thank you. What a lovely greeting. What is this place?
This is the site of a Māori pā, which you would call a village.
This down here, yeah.
These are sleeping huts. And the key to this one is you can see clearly the tree fern that was used in the construction of these huts.
That's fantastic.
Absolutely. And if you look here, there is a picture of what it looked like in 1842.
This is a fascinating drawing, that, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And what this clearly shows you is how Māori lived pre-European settlement. These are sleeping huts and they're very low to the ground because of the weather.
So in 1839, you guys were living in this kind of settlement. And in a very few years, all this had sprung up.
Absolutely. And if we look at this picture, and this is why we've used it, you can see the palisading of the village, and we lived in them very quickly.
Wow. Yeah. Liz, tell me about the archaeology.
I will, Tony. Come with me. This is a private showing.
So what have we got here? Oh, this is very nice, isn't it? Is this one hut?
Yes, it is. This is a sleeping hut.
Wow. It's so lovely, but incredibly fragile. I'm surprised that this has survived at all.
And so are we, and that's really because of the 1855 earthquake, we believe. There was a tsunami in the harbour, and what we think has happened is that the building imploded on itself, swept the gravel of the sea over top of this, and saved it.
So have you purchased this little piece of land from the owner?
Yes, we have.
How much did it cost you?
It cost us $1. One broken gun and one white shirt.
I think that was a pretty reasonable exchange, don't you?
It was a very good exchange.
The local Maori reckon there's more high-quality archaeology under this pavement, and also some on the other side of Taranaki Street, although I can't really imagine the council letting them do all that excavation, can you?
This is Wellington, and we're halfway through my Trans-Tasman trek. I've critiqued its Polly's grand designs, praised its globe-trotting pooch, and dug into its Maori past. Time to head out of town.
I'm only, less than a couple of kilometres from the city centre, but already its character has changed incredibly, hasn't it? And it's only when you get up this high that you realise what a small place Wellington actually is. I mean, if you were looking from this height at most towns, they'd swamp the landscape, wouldn't they? But this one looks like it's battling for survival with all the trees and wilderness.
I'm heading over the hill to a quiet little outer suburb. Officially, it's known as Miramar. Unofficially, Wellywood. Thanks largely to one hometown boy made very good.
Peter, do a lot of people who work for you live around here?
Yeah, I mean, we probably, within Miramar, even just permanently, when we're not making a movie, we've got probably 1,500 people working for the digital company, Weta Digital, because that's a full-time. And then when we're shooting a movie, there can be upwards of another 1,500, 2,000 people. So most of them try to get houses around this area, yeah.
So what's here that belongs to you guys?
Well, the first thing is actually this building right here, which used to be a home for wayward girls.
Yeah.
And when we bought it, behind the building there was a concrete cell block, like prison cells.
Wow. You now have character, competence and community,
yes.
but no cells there.
No, this is the school. The school used to own the building, and then we bought the building off the school to put about 100 digital artists, and that's happening there.
That's fantastic. Now, this has got to be you, isn't it, Weta?
Yeah, now this is Miramar Wonderland.
Can we peek inside and whip out again? I was going to say maybe you should put on a false beard, but that would be ridiculous.
It would be, unfortunately, yes.
This is absolutely splendid, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's a little museum. There's props and collectibles on display. The productions that we've been involved with over the years.
Fantastic.
But I can take you to Park Road Post, which is just around the corner here.
Let's have a look.
Okay, cool. My two favourite parts of the filmmaking process are script writing, and then I love it in post-production because you're sort of crafting the movie. There's another whole layer of invention goes on to try to make it into the best film that you can.
What about the filming? I thought that's what directors did.
That's the bit in the middle. No. So this is Park Road Post.
Fairly splendid architecture.
Yeah, it was actually built while we were doing The Lord of the Rings. We were kind of doing the movies and building this at the same time.
Ooh, Peter. This is absolutely splendid, isn't it?
It's a great place to come to work, I got to say.
But it does all rather beg the question, why? Why did you invest so much of your own money in post-production when presumably you could have just filmed all your movies in New Zealand and then farmed out the post and the special effects somewhere else?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have been as comfortable in a way. We really had an opportunity to build a post-production facility that was designed by filmmakers for filmmakers, somewhere that's really comfortable and a great working environment. And so that was definitely an attraction, plus the fact that we live 5 minutes away. So to get in your car and be at work in 5 minutes with not a single traffic light, no rush hour, that is just, that's nice. It's a nice way to live.
And you've managed to transform your own hometown in the process.
Yeah.
Not many people can say that.
With a huge amount of help. I mean, a lot of support.
Well, thanks ever so much, Peter.
Tony, you're very welcome.
Cheers.
Okay, then. Bye-bye.
See you again. Bye.
Just one thing, Tony, just before you go. Matt, I've got a collection of costumes and movie props that I've just collected over the years.
Yeah.
There's things that I kind of like, and I thought you might appreciate taking a little look at this one here. See if you recognise it.
Is that what I think it is?
It is.
This is Blackadder 2, isn't it?
It absolutely is.
This is Baldrick.
Yep, it's my favourite series of the Blackadder series. Oh, look, there you go.
It still fits me round the head. Round here, it would not fit me anymore.
No.
But oh, well, that's a blast from the past.
Yeah.
Ooh. Thank you. What a lovely surprise. Cheers.
You're very welcome. Okay, Tony.
Try it on after I've gone, but you may have the same trouble as me.
I'll have exactly the same trouble as you. Hey, take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Can you imagine how incredibly flattering that was for me to know that someone of the stature of Peter Jackson has got my costume? I know on these walks, often things happen which you're not expecting, but I certainly wasn't expecting that one.
Time to go back over the hill and back in time to Wellington, early 20th century.
In those days, manual work in New Zealand meant long hours and very low wages. So people like the miners and the wharf workers and the drivers, even the newspaper boys, had very strong unions. And in 1912, there'd been a long and bitter mining dispute, after which a new government came in that was determined to smash the power of the unions.
A year later, Wellington was the turbulent heart of a general strike that rocked New Zealand to its core.
This is Buckle Street. As you can see, there's a lot of roadworks going on right now. But in 1913, this was the epicentre of where all the bother was going on. This is Mount Cook Police Barracks. In fact, the only difference really is that in 1913, there's about 1,200 special constables armed with batons and guns who had been brought in to smash the strike.
These disgruntled local farmers had been given special powers by Conservative Prime Minister William Farmer Bill Massey. I wonder where his sympathies lay.
Can you hold this for me a minute, Tom? The trouble started when the wharfies stopped work just for a couple of hours to sort out some minor dispute, but the Harbour Board took that as their opportunity to take over the wharf. They brought in their own people, they bussed in a whole load of new guys, and when the wharfies came back, they couldn't get into the wharf anymore. As you can imagine, they were absolutely furious, and they decided to fight to try and take it back over. Took them 2 days, but eventually the wharf was there again, and they shut the whole harbour side down. Nothing could move in or out. Not only that, but the strike spread. It went all over the country, so the government brought in reinforcements. Excuse me, would you mind being the special constables for us. These were local farmers who were irate because they couldn't bring their food and produce down to the harbour anymore and they were losing a lot of money, OK? Guys, would you mind helping me? Could you form a picket line here? You're the wharfies, and the last thing that you want is for these special constables, the local farmers, to break through onto the wharf. So if you lock arms, that's right, you're charging, you've got loads of guns, and you're probably a bit drunk, and however much we try and resist them, there's so many of them that eventually they manage to break through. They're triumphant, crowing. Did you hear them crowing? And we, unfortunately, have lost the strike.
The strike may have been broken, but the battle was far from lost. More than 3 decades later, 2 of the ringleaders, Peter Fraser and Michael Savage, went on to become the first 2 Labour Prime Ministers.
Thank you very much, guys. Thank you. Thank you very much.
See you, Tony.
Bye.
See you, mate.
My walk's gone international. I'm heading into the heart of Wellington for a little taste of Cuba. Cuba Street Mall, that is.
Excuse me.
Hi there.
What are these?
Oh, those are feijoas. They just came in, new season. They're really sweet and they've got a really lovely tangy-ish taste as well. All you do is just cut them open and scoop them up with a spoon.
Oh, fantastic. Can I have this?
Yes, sure. Good source of vitamin C as well. Perfect for when you've got a cold.
That's a bloke. Mmm. Very nice, aren't they?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can I take this?
Yes, of course.
Juicy feijoa goes right to the top of my list. This is the water mobile, although everybody calls it the bucket fountain. It was designed in the 1960s, you can see that, can't you? And whenever it's windy in Wellington, which is, let's face it, most days, it gets all the kids soaking wet, doesn't it? But you don't mind. It's quite interesting, really. The purists loathe it, but the tourists love it. We like it, don't we? It's really good, isn't it?
I'm going to finish my walk by treading the boards in one of Wellington's beautiful old theatres.
In the year 1926, here at the Grand Opera House, the theatrical event of the year took place. The most famous ballet dancer in the whole world, a woman so talented they said that she didn't just dance, she flew as if on wings, appeared right here. And what was the name of this exquisite piece of loveliness? Anna Pavlova, the prima ballerina at the Ballet Russe. She jeted, she pirouetted, her adoring crowd cheered her to the rafters, and then she was off again. She turned up in Australia, and once again, she jeted, she pirouetted, her adoring crowd cheered her to the rafters. But it wasn't just her dancing that inspired people. She had the most gorgeous costume, a white tutu dotted with green silk cabbage roses. And they inspired this. And afters, a dessert with the meringue and the cream representing the tutu and the kiwi fruit being the green cabbage roses. It is, of course, a pavlova, or as they say round here, a pavlova, or something like that. But the interesting thing about this particular dessert is that it has created the most monumental row which has gone on for the best part of 80 years. And the row is about who first invented the pavlova. Was it the Australians or the New Zealanders? Was it in Perth or in Wellington? It is very creamy. Well, I can now tell you that officially the Oxford English Dictionary has pronounced that the very first pavlova pavlova meringue was created here in New Zealand in the year 1929. So at this moment, all New Zealanders should be glowing with patriotic pride. Do you want a bit?
Wellington may be a small city, but whichever way you look at it, my full-day walk certainly takes the cake.
It's a nice piece of work, this, isn't it? It's called Solace in the Wind. Although, frankly, Wellington hasn't really lived up to its windy reputation while I've been here. It's a beautiful day today. I've grown to have quite a lot of respect for the place, though. It's very clean, very beautiful, and it's had an incredible amount of influence given what a small place it is, with the work Peter Jackson's done over the past few years, and, of course, with its world-famous dessert. See ya. For the best part of 200 years, people have been standing where I am on the top of Castle Hill, marvelling at the view of Townsville below them. But I'm not marvelling, I think it's rubbish, a complete travesty. I don't mean the view or the town, I mean the name of the town. I think it should be called something completely different. Bet you can't wait to find out what.
This week, my itchy feet are taking me to tropical Townsville. Starting up a big hill and finishing down in the town. I'm on the case of an unsung hero.
Blacktown, Blacktown, Blacktown!
Yeah. Delving into some surprising World War II relics.
This is an air raid shelter.
And exposing some historical hijinks.
Clark writers of Townsville, we're on to you.
I can't help it. I'm just a nosy little sod.
It's all right, just talking to myself. I'm not mad. There it is, Castle Hill, all 298 metres of it. Another 2.1 metres and it would qualify as a mountain. Certainly felt like a mountain on the way up, I tell you. But it is gorgeous, isn't it? So rugged, so untrammelled by humanity. Although having said that, Zach, just go left a little bit. Now, can you tighten up a bit? Look, that's not untrammelled by humanity, is it? That's a little stick man. Shane, come here. Come here. Who did that?
Guilty.
You actually painted that?
I did.
What were you doing at the time?
I was a student at James Cook University of North Queensland.
Yeah.
And the arts law guys, of which I was part, and the engineering department decided after several libations to paint what is the mascot of the James Cook Uni.
So it was an interdisciplinary project?
If you want to put it that formally. As a matter of fact, yes.
How did you get down there?
It wasn't easy. There was a long cable involved, an electric motor that was provided by the engineering guys. Yeah. There was a car tyre attached to the bottom of the cable, and I was in the car tyre.
You were sitting in the car tyre, standing on the car tyre?
Oh, no, sitting. I mean, yeah, we have to observe the safety proprieties, yeah.
With your paintbrush. So you're swaying backwards and forwards in this car tyre. Why are the legs so small compared with the rest of the body?
That's called fear. That's called panic, because by the time I got to the legs, it was about sort of 4:30.
Yeah.
I looked down between my legs. I could see the rocks upon which I was going to be dashed to pieces. All of a sudden, that didn't become important anymore. And as, you know, if you look very closely, just at the bottom of the feet, you'll see scorch marks. Because I was shitting blue flames.
Now, tell me, given that you've admitted it on television...
No, I didn't.
Oh, right. Okay,
I deny all responsibility.
Fair enough. This man didn't do that.
I didn't.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
He did. I love stories like that. I mean, some people would say it's not history, wouldn't they? But I think it is. It's 40 years ago. Some great surface archaeology. Brilliant. So I'm just talking to myself. I'm not mad. Well, at least not as mad as Shane.
Just down the road from Castle Hill, you'll find the Strand, Townsville's famous stretch of beach. The perfect place for this lily-white pom to escape the horrors of an English winter, right? Wrong.
I thought, great, I'll get to Townsville, it's the tropics, I'll be able to do loads of swimming, lovely golden beaches. I arrive here, look, see that? Red flag, no swimming, marine stingers. And they're not just those big jellyfish that you can get away from easily. They've got these tiny little things called irukandji, which bite like crazy. You see that white thing there? That is apparently a vinegar station. Now, in an English holiday resort, vinegar is for chips. That is for pouring onto your arms and your legs and your bodies because you've been stung so much. Queensland, beautiful one day, marine death the next. And look over here, see this tree? On it, it is covered in green ants. And what they do is they bite holes in your arm and then they sort of sit on your arm and they squirt all this poisonous stuff in. It's like something out of a sci-fi movie. Have a look at them.
Note to self, don't climb any trees and book another trip to Townsville between July and October. Presumably that's when the stingers take their annual holidays. Anyway, enough about me, let's talk names.
I've always thought that Townsville is a pretty weird name for this place. Excuse me one minute. Because ville is French for town and town is English for town, so it kind of means town. Well, I thought that until I discovered this bloke. Robert Towns, the founder of Townsville. Look at him there, the hero, gazing over his new settlement with his spyglass in his hand. Except he only came here once and he whinged about it when he arrived. He said it was full of bites and blights, which is a great phrase, but a bit rude about the place. In fact, the one thing that people round here remember him for is the fact that it was him who introduced the Kanaks here, the South Sea Islanders who came here in conditions of virtual slavery to work in the plantations. So is it really justifiable that he should have the town named after him?
I say no, and I'm taking my one-man crusade to the streets.
A bit of rabble-rousing takes me back to my youth. I love this. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry to interrupt you on such a lovely day, but I wondered how many of you know why Townsville is called Townsville?
After Robert Towns.
Robert Towns. Yeah, you've all heard of Robert Towns, but I would like to argue that there is another man who would be far more justified in being the eponymous hero of that town, and that's John Melton Black. How many of you know about Black?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, so 4. Significantly less, though. OK, well, let me tell you about him. John Melton Black, he was an associate of Towns, and it was his energy and drive that really created this city. He was the first mayor, he built the first house here, he helped to create the first art school and the first newspaper. So I would like to ask you, do you think this place should be called not Townsville, but Blackville?
I wouldn't say Blackville, but I'm for Blacktown.
Yeah.
Blacktown?
Blacktown.
And Townsville?
Black should get some credit for something, but I don't think the town, not now anyway.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. Oh, and you're swaying more of them now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is about 50-50, which is a result I didn't expect. I mean, in a way, it's understandable, isn't it? It's called Townsville. It's always the money men who get the towns named after them. But I would love you to campaign for Blackville. Let me come back in a year's time and know this is Blacktown. Blacktown! Blacktown! Yeah. See ya.
Blacktown, Townsville, Town. What's in a name, I hear you say? Well, plenty, especially if you lived on the other side of Victoria Bridge about 100 years ago.
Ross Island used to be really rough. It was where the wharfies and the meat packers lived. In fact, the people on this side used to complain that the air pollution was so bad from there that it would tarnish their silver and brassware. The Ross Island people were known as mud pickers because they had to crawl through the mud in order to get over there, and then they would spend the rest of the day picking it out of their toes. Mind you, particularly in the early days, they would have been really relieved to have got across because there were crocodiles and sharks, and it wasn't unknown to find a bit of chewed dog or a bit of horse in there.
Down by the river's now a trendy spot to own your own little patch. And speaking of owning land...
This is a Torres Strait Islander drum, and it's a replica of one made by Eddie Mabo, the world-renowned activist in the struggle for Indigenous land rights.
Eddie Koiki Mabo was born up north on Murray Island, but lived and worked in Townsville for much of his adult life.
But for you, Noel, it's very different. He was your friend, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
How long had he been involved in the struggle for Aboriginal rights when you knew him?
Well, when I met him in 1967, he had been involved for, say, 5 or 6 years or 7 years before that, yes. Yes, very much involved. And so he knew all about the fact that Aborigines didn't have land rights. But he, like all of the Torres Strait Islanders at that time, thought that they actually did own their own land.
But there was a telling moment, wasn't there, at James Cook University here in Townsville, where you and a fellow lecturer told him something about his land rights that completely transformed his attitude.
Yes, I said, Koiki, you don't own that land, it's Crown land. And I was able to show him on a map I have from a previous lecture, a map of Queensland, the Torres Strait Islands were labelled Aboriginal Reserve. And Mabo said, I'd like to see someone take my land away from me.
And the rest, as they say, is history. In 1982, Mabo began a 10-year court battle which eventually overturned the legal fiction of terra nullius, that Australia was owned by no one before the British.
Initially, I had thought it was too big a case to win. I didn't ever tell Koiki that, but I thought it was just too big to overturn the whole law in which Australia was settled.
How did you feel the moment you realised you'd won?
Exalted that it had happened, couldn't believe that it had been applied to the whole of the Australia, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as well. That's one hell of an achievement, really.
Thank you, mate. It's an excellent story and one that doesn't diminish in the telling.
No.
Thanks a lot.
Sadly, Eddie died just 5 months before the High Court's landmark ruling was handed down. 3 years later, his family and friends gathered in Townsville to celebrate the unveiling of his tombstone.
But the next morning, one of his friends went back to the tombstone to say goodbye before he flew off, and he found that the entire site had been desecrated. There was graffiti everywhere, Nazi swastikas and the word Abo sprayed up in red, which was particularly ridiculous given that Eddie was a Torres Strait Islander. But sadly, after all his years of struggle, it showed that racism is far from dead.
Today I'm in Townsville, exposing a high-flying graffiti artist, campaigning to blacken the name of the city, and celebrating a battle for social justice. Not your average walk, is it? What do you reckon? Car exhaust pipe? Toilet brush holder? The locals affectionately call it the sugar shaker. Yeah, that works for me. My walk's taking me into Townsville's main drag, Flinders Street.
This is what it looks like today, and this is what it looked like in the 1940s. That, by the way, is a bomb shelter. War had come to the Pacific. The Japanese were moving remorselessly down Southeast Asia, and Australia was in their sights. Townsville was becoming more and more vulnerable.
It was over 70 years ago, but look hard enough and you'll find the memories and the landmarks haven't entirely faded away.
This is a lovely little house, but there's something rather odd about it. See, all of this concrete? It's a concrete jungle there, isn't it? It's been zhuzhed up a bit along this wall to make it look more 21st century. But when you come in here, you understand what all that concrete was about. It's a lovely bright bedroom now, but look, concrete, concrete, concrete everywhere. Look at that massive RSJ up in the ceiling. That's going to withstand a lot of shock, isn't it? And the reason is because this is an air raid shelter. Now, that might seem rather weird in Townsville, but in 1942, after the Japs had bombed Darwin, they then moved down to Sydney and attacked it there. They then started recceing over Townsville, and the people here began to realise that they were likely to be the next under attack. Estelle.
Hey, Tony.
It's a nice little spread, isn't it?
Yes, it's lovely.
Can I have a piece of cake?
You can indeed, yes.
Thank you very much. Now, you were actually here in Townsville, weren't you?
Yes.
On that fateful day when the bomb dropped.
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Well, it was winter time, cold for North Queenslanders, and my brother and I were sent out to the slit trench, they called it, out in the backyard.
This is at night?
Yes, yes.
How old would you have been?
We were both 15.
And what could you see?
About 9 or 10 searchlights on one plane in the air. The bomb started to drop and it sounded very close. My brother said to me, "Oh, that must have been in the next street, sis."
Let me stop you there for a minute. I've got a recording here that was taken on that night of the bombing, and they recorded it only about 50 metres away from where we are now. See if this rings a bell.
The plane at the moment is absolutely dead above me. It's flying almost dead under the light of the moon. Someone's optimistically firing with a light machine gun behind it there, but it's well out of its range. The sky at the moment is crisscrossed with about 20 searchlights. It's a most magnificent sight. This plane is holding the lights absolutely dead above us.
You remember all the pattern of all the searchlights?
Yes, and the red tracer bullets following the plane. That was fascinating. They kept up all the time. How they didn't hit the plane, I don't know. But...
Were you frightened?
I was. But my brother was there. He was very brave.
Well, thank you for sharing that with me.
That's all right.
Do you like me to make a recording of this? I'll send it to you.
Yeah.
OK.
Thank you.
Good to meet you.
Thank you.
Bye.
The horrors of the London Blitz were still fresh in Allied memories, so I can imagine the threat of invasion would have affected every aspect of day-to-day life here. Take the post office, for instance.
Honestly, as far as I'm concerned, this looks as good as most churches with its arches and its verandas and its great clock tower. Mind you, it didn't always look like that. In the 1940s, the tower just kind of disappeared. Why was that? Well, Darwin had just been shot up by the Japanese and they wanted to make sure that this tower wasn't an easy target. But then, back in the 1960s, they did a refurb and it looked like this again. But there's one thing that really irritates me about that clock tower, and I know it irritates a lot of people around here. Look, I'll show you. What's the time? But then when you go around that side, what's the time? And that side? And that side, they're all different and nobody appears to know why. I'll see if I can find out. Are you happy to come with me? Come on, see what we can learn. Cool, it's a lovely interior. It's a brewery, apparently, with a bar at the front of it. There doesn't appear to be anybody here. I think it's too early even for Australians to be drinking. Mind you, they wouldn't know what time it was, would they, because of the flipping clock. Hello? Hello? Nah. Nobody here. Pity, isn't it? Cut.
Hello, can I help you?
Oh, have you cut? No? Hiya. Hi, my name's Tony Robinson.
Hi, Tony.
Hi, we're doing this series called Tony Robinson's Time Walks, and I wondered if you could tell me why the clocks on the tower don't work. Everyone gets really frustrated about it, you know.
Sure. In 2011, Tony, Cyclone Yasi hit Townsville, and it ripped apart the hands on some of the faces on the clocks, so consequently the clocks are no longer working.
2011 is a rather long time ago.
Sure, we are working on it. It's a very specialised job, but it is on our plans to have it repaired.
You promised me, or at least not me, but you promised the people of Townsville.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
Bye. See you.
See you.
Actually, that's... Zach, have a look at that. There, that sort of... Is that a chimney piece above a fire, that thing sticking out there with the mirrors on?
No, Tony, that's left over from the old post office. That was a spy room for the postmaster. So he used to look down on his employees to make sure they weren't stealing anything or being very productive.
A little spy hole?
That's right.
That's crafty, isn't it? You should use that now.
We do.
You do? Well, you keep an eye on the people, make sure they don't get drunk.
Exactly.
Oh, very sensible. See you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Cheers.
That was a turn up for the books, wasn't it? It is funny, though, even though this building is so elegant, and honestly, to my mind, this is the most beautiful building that I've seen in the whole of Townsville. When it was first put up, people used to stand around here going, this is an absolute disgrace. How can the post office waste all this money when there are people on Ross Island living in squalor and poverty? And the reason that they did it here was because at the time, this little area was like, you know, Hyde Park Corner in London, where people stand on soap boxes and orate. Not that there's anyone here at the moment, but I'll have a go. People of Townsville, do you wish your wonderful conurbation to change its name from Townsville to Blacktown? Blacktown, Blacktown, Blacktown.
I don't know why I'm bothering. My walk round Townsville's had a bit of everything except a train trip. So I'm off to the station. I think I can hear the infamous 1906 safe robbery coming down the line.
Excuse me, is it all right if I use your back office? Just for a couple of minutes, OK? Thank you. OK, so this is the story. On Christmas Eve, a local employee needed to get some money out of the safe, so he went round to the assistant station master, William Connolly, got the key from him, went back to the station, went into the office, went over to the safe, opened the safe and shock horror, there's no money in the safe. £1,567 was missing. So he informed William Connolly, who was absolutely livid. He said, I am so mad, this is appalling. Someone will pay for it. And a month later, a local ne'er-do-well called Albert Griffith was arrested, but he said, no, it wasn't me. OK, it is a fair cop. I was in the office at the time, but when I went in there, there was a man with a big sack, and he was shoveling all the money into the sack, and he paid me £74 to keep my mouth shut. And the coppers said to him, who was that mysterious man? And he said, it was the assistant station master, William Connolly. So they let Griffith go and they arrested Connolly, but they didn't have enough evidence to convict him. So they had a little ruse, what one might call a cunning plan. Whenever Connolly's wife came to see him, and she visited him about 8 times in all, they took them into a room where there was a low counter like this, and they hid a policeman in a little recess in order to see if they would say anything that might implicate them. In fact, it was so tight that they had to cut a little hole so he could breathe properly. But they didn't say anything incriminating. So in the end, they had to let him go. The case was closed, and it's still unsolved to this very day. There is, though, one piece of evidence against Connolly which I find particularly fascinating, although clearly the judge wasn't very impressed by it. It was a letter that Connolly wrote to Griffith. It was published in the local newspaper. Here it is. Can you see here? Dear A, I cannot do as you wish. I find I'm too closely watched. It would be hard for you to prove what you saw on Christmas morning because I can get proof that I was home the time you would say you saw me. It's texting, isn't it? It's a text message. 100 years before texting became popular, Connolly was doing it. What an innovator. Brilliant man. LOL.
There's nothing like being the first, is there? I'm finishing my walk through Townsville with another first, which wasn't. First, that is.
Imagine the scenes here. September the 16th, 1901. Huge crowds, lots of pomp and circumstance, as for the very first time in Australia, the Governor-General unfurls the Australian flag. Hooray! And, quite understandably, 50 years later, they put up a plaque to celebrate the fact. Except that some years after that, a researcher found out that it wasn't the first time that the Australian flag had ever been unfurled. That happened a fortnight previously in Melbourne. So they've now altered this plaque so that it reads, "Near where you're standing, the Australian flag was unfurled by the Governor-General for the very first time." So it still sounds like it was the first time it was unfurled anywhere in Australia, but it wasn't. It was just the first time it was ever unfurled by the Governor-General. Plaque writers of Townsville, we're on to you.
The rest of Townsville, though, can take a bow. I've walked the walk and you have talked the talk.
I was really looking forward to coming to Townsville, and I haven't been disappointed. But one thing I have noticed, and I don't know if you've spotted it, but there are so few people in the centre of town.
Is that because there are so many out-of-town shopping malls? Do they need to take it back to a pedestrian precinct with lots of entertainment?
I don't know, but whatever they decide to do, I hope it works.